Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Mordred's Community Multiplayer Political Chat. I'm Torsion and joined as always by Zale. Hey Zale, how's it
Hey,
going?
it's going pretty good. How are you?
Good. Lot to unpack. Where would you like to start?
Oh man, that's a great question. I don't know. You kind of centered over the Raj right now, so why don't we start? Why don't we start kind of in India?
Sounds good. So, two major things on the Indian front. Bengal, no longer with us, unfortunately. Put up a good fight, but that first war with Rajputana took a lot out of them. While Rajputana was occupied with Russia, Vijay seized upon that and uh, put the death nail in Bengal. So we're down to Rajput, Vijayanagar, Bengal, no more. So as you can see, countries in rough shape. Uh, yeah. So we'll be starting next session with two players in India. Thoughts on how that balance of power is going to play out over the coming weeks?
Yeah, it's very interesting, and there's been a lot of like complex sort of political shenanigans going on in the background. Because that war that you talked about, where Rajput took a lot out of Bengal, they actually white peaced, and I believe the original plan was that they were going to work together to split Vijayanagar. But you look now, Vijay and Rajput are allied.
Yeah, and even
Um,
with the white peace, the toll had been taken on Bengal's economy. It leads to devastation. You can see all of India is prosperous except for the land held by Bengal. That makes a big difference, and manpower reserves on both sides, I believe, were drained down to zero. Uh, Bengal was in quite a bit of debt, etc.
yeah, absolutely. And you also have a lot of powers nearby, such as Malaya, such as myself, that are going to be looking at sort of what sort of opportunities open up there. See if we can sneak in Bengal maybe, or what sort of deals we're going to have to make now that Rajputana and Vijayanagar are allied again, and looking to expand and get even more dev and control over that trade. Especially with Portugal and Great Britain kind of encroaching in. I believe Kaiser is joining as Hormuz,
Correct.
and then you also very very cheekily got a claim fabricated on Rajputana right at the end of the session. So there's obviously a lot of focus being put on India right now. It's going to be interesting to see if the two remaining players decide to work together, or if one of them tries to get some sort of outside help and change things up.
You mentioned yourself, obviously heavily involved in this region. Bengal had control over Mongyang and Arakan in the Burma and Chengdu trade nodes. Are you diving in on Bengal? Will we see Nepal transition into India to grab what is arguably some of the better land in the game? A lot of silk, paper, cloth, cotton in this area, farmlands, etc.
Yeah, that's a good question. The short answer is probably not. Given, I mean, if you just look at what Raj's Diplo, they're giving me subs right now, so there's not much incentive to try to block them from expanding too much. I'll definitely be going into the Burma node, but as for Bengal proper, um, we'll kind of see how things shake out. As I said, depending on how Vijay and Raj want to play off each other. Um, there might be some expansion in Bengal, but I'm not really planning on it right now.
And as we zoom a little bit out, we look at Russia, the Ottomans, the persistent threats that the Asian are facing. Malaya fought a war against Great Britain for a while. Um, it's been relatively peaceful between Malaya, Japan, Qing, Nepal. There was that VJ Malaya war, but it looks like they're allied now. Um, should we see any inter-Asian conflict moving forward, or do you expect the Asians to look west?
From an outside perspective, I think most people would think that there's not going to be. We're pretty cohesive. From the inside, though, I'm not so sure. It really, I think, depends on how much of a threat the outside powers shape up to be. As you're noting right now, Qing has all of China as a core. He popped that mission and got all those cores, so he's making a solid negative, I think, 7 prestige from it. And it's going to be interesting if he's going to take the hit to uncore that stuff or if he's going to go after it. I think he's pretty happy with the borders currently, but there's always these calculations that kind of have to come into play. And like Malaya and Ashikaga are great naval powers, but if they mess up one war or 2 wars, suddenly you'll have Portugal, you'll have Great Britain with land in China. And so we might decide, we haven't really talked with them, so we got to kind of figure that out, but we might decide, hold up. Maybe we don't have to war, but we're not so comfortable with you having all of Canton or something like that. So it's gonna be a pretty fluid situation. I expect that there won't be any wars, but I'm not gonna pretend that the possibility is not there.
Okay.
Especially given that VJ has abandoned, or not abandoned, but sort of changed sides, I think almost 3 or 4 times now. So I myself am kind of a little suspicious of Eratos, this particular multiplayer. He's been a pretty good one, reliable ally for previous ones, but this one, he's a little bit sus.
I think he played the Bengal move perfectly. I think his hand got forced with the swapping of the Rajputana player and the Rajput deal to save Bengal. He did look elsewhere. He's maintained that Malaya alliance, and taking down Bengal while Rajput was busy with Russia, I thought was a very strong, very smart play, because he almost flipped the Indian power dynamic. Now, with just the 2 of them in the region, he's got a manpower advantage and an eco advantage. So he's now the power broker in India.
Yes. The only exception to that is the fact that I haven't really looked to depth, but his quality isn't as high. And right now his allies are, I believe, Ethiopia and no, not Ethiopia. Sorry, Rajputana and Malaya. Soon Rajputana is going to be losing that great power, so he can get another one. But for now, it's myself, Raj, and Ching. And so the VJ might be able to beat Raj currently, out eco and out manpower them. But I don't know that Eratos would be able to beat all 3 of us with only Malaya as his ally. If it comes to that, like I said, I don't know that it will, but what if it sort of comes to that? So it's very fluid, and we'll see how they split up Bengal. I think that'll be very telling for future, how it's going to go down.
And now let's pivot, touch a little bit on the Russian war. So at the start of the session, Jamie was at war with a member of the HRE, Italy.
You mean Cal? Or
No, so Jamie was fighting Italy. A number of the other HRE princes were defending Italy, including Prussia, which was giving Jamie a difficult time. There was some back-channel diplomacy going on where myself and Jamie leaned heavily on Calico to attack the PLC to relieve some of the pressure in Italy. And by doing so, he brought Prussia and the Commonwealth against him. India and yourself and Ching, or Rajput, Nepal, and Ching saw that as an opportunity, jumped on Russia. I joined in briefly to try to relieve some pressure off of the Commonwealth and maintain a status quo, but Calico eventually fought like a wounded bear and was able to hold on against decent odds against him, but his country suffered pretty extensive devastation. Essentially, it was almost a lost session from a country progress perspective. What are your thoughts on Russia moving forward?
yeah, so that's a good question, and I think it's interesting because it was a very, like I said, I expected pretty much all those players to be at war, but it didn't turn out how I expected it to turn out. So like myself, I was planning as Nepal to invade Rajputana last session. And I kind of done some diplo with Russia to that effect. But what turned out was I thought I was going to be getting an alliance with Russia, and that was purely my mistake, my bad. But as the session went on, and prior to session, a lot of people had, that guy's Great Britain, a few other people telling me, hey, stop Russia, dude, fight Russia. So as session went on, and I didn't get the alliance that I was expecting, which I wasn't going to get, but I was just being a derp. And we saw Russia creep that Siberian frontier, and then all of a sudden he declares war on the Commonwealth. Prussia and the Commonwealth was scrambling, but they're losing, which blew Qing, myself, and Rajputana out of the water. We were not expecting that. I kind of had to pivot. I got the alliance with Rajputana pretty much the day before session, which I wasn't expecting. And I was like, I thought to myself, well, hold on, someone's got to stop this Russia. I thought I was getting all these deals, but it seems like he's more warmongering. Because the fact is, neither myself nor Qing want really any of Russian land. Like, I'm pretty much content with what I'm going to be getting in Burma and what I have in China. There's not really much reason for me to go into Russia. Just so we were doing that war for the sole purpose of stalling Russia, because no one else seemed to be doing it. No one else seemed to want to do it. I came and talked with you. You kind of like, no, I'm not gonna jump on him. And of course you did, but that's a different story. So mostly that war was to stop him. I thought him immediately. In the heat of the moment, I was surprised that he surrendered to you 100%, like just unconditional right away. But I think that was a really smart move on his part, and I was really surprised by Holy Victor signing a treaty with Russia, because when we in Asia were still at war with him, the Commonwealth Treaty came up, so he could have actually attacked Russia again, and that would have been the death blow. I don't think Calico would have ever been possibly able to recover from that. But somehow they worked out a deal for whatever reason, and they didn't declare that war. Russia got to kind of straggle on, and I got to talking with him, and I was talking with my allies, and especially considering it was a misconception from the beginning, there wasn't really much reason for us to pursue a longer war. So we just kind of pieced out from 15%. And then it'll be interesting to see if these sort of deals that Russia has, back deals with you and Jamie, his current deal with Commonwealth, whatever sort of deal he and I might come to, and Qing and Rajputana and stuff. It's interesting to see if those will actually hold for this next session, allow him to recover and build those manpower buildings and stuff, especially the soldier one, bring him up to like 2 million. Yeah, he hasn't built any of those as you're showing. It's interesting to see if he'll get that session to kind of build up, in which case I don't think he'll be stoppable, but if people decide to attack him right now, I think that he's going to have a very rough session, potentially not be able to make it through.
Yeah, and pivoting a little, I'll touch base on my thoughts as the Ottomans. I've been playing this weird game where I've been attempting to maintain the status quo. At the start of the game, we had a Timurids player. You yourself were in the Mamelukes. We had a Commonwealth, a Russia, Rajputana, and Austria. So a decent number of neighbors in strong countries. But every one of my neighbors, Russia missed the first 3 sessions and had subs, so a lack of continuity there. The Commonwealth player had to withdraw for health reasons. Austria withdrew recently. Mamluks swapped out. Rajputana swapped as well. Timurids unfortunately didn't continue after the first session, so it's been a revolving door on my borders, and I've had this weird moral thing where I don't want to take advantage of the swapping of the players or something along those lines, and because of that I've inserted myself opportunistically and poorly at certain times. So I jumped in on Russia, in the hopes of saving the Commonwealth, and he unconditional to me. I just took ducats and we took a single province for Georgia, and it was clear after that unconditional that Russia had his hands full with the Commonwealth, etc., and the Asians without me getting involved. So I've kind of taken a step back, and I'm going to approach this Saturday session a little bit differently, try to focus a little more on the Ottomans rather than trying to play this weird cop for the rest of the world, trying to maintain a status quo that needs to be shaken up.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mention your involvement with Russia, because if I remember correctly, you gave, after your war, after you've pieced out, you gave him 15,000 ducats, and that actually saved him, I
maybe
think,
20,000 total over the course of the war. It did save him from bankruptcy.
And yeah, if you hadn't done that, us Asians probably would have won.
Oh,
but
easily.
Of course,
he was months away from bankruptcy.
So it's kind of interesting because in your desire to kind of maintain the status quo and stuff around you, and not get too heavily involved or whatever you're saying. I think you kind of have come off and a complete opposite sort of appearance to everyone. You know, you haven't really gotten any love from Raj, myself, and Ching for bailing Russia out. You certainly haven't gotten any love with Commonwealth or any of the remaining HRE for inserting yourself into Austria, but also for doing those money wars. So I think,
Yeah, I actually did a money war on Switzerland during the Russia war in order to
oh my
pull
gosh,
Swiss and Lotharingian troops off of the front with Russia.
yeah. You know, you're gonna ask me at the end, Blue Flames, and I'm gonna tell you, if you don't get attacked by at least two different coalitions or whatever this session, I'm gonna be very surprised.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny. I spent all this time meddling in other affairs, and we now have Spain rising in Western Europe. Their manpower reserves have almost equaled mine. Their economy, while a little bit behind mine, can be supplemented by Portugal. So Iberia, I would say, is on parity with myself. So I've spent all this time bothering here, spent 15,000 ducats propping up Russia. Didn't need to do that, hurt my own country in the process. And had I just stayed out of the Russian war entirely, I probably could have saved myself those 15,000 ducats and it might have been a similar outcome. So, yeah, it's it's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, and, it's interesting also that you mentioned Italy. Of course, we have the current war going on, but that's been a very fluid situation, and allowing Jamie, you allowing, and these like France and stuff allowing Jamie to kind of manage to finagle this foothold he has, pretty much uncontested, is gonna really shake things up politically the next few sessions. We're gonna see, like for instance, Switzerland. Perhaps he's going to want to, for whatever reason, ally you, see if he can go against a new Spain power that's going to be on the southern border. Perhaps we're going to see Prussia come in and say, hey, you know, we've been fighting, but is there really any reason to continue fighting? Um, you know, we're all now bordering the Ottomans. That's a lot of land to split three ways, you know, between him and the Commonwealth and Spain. Um, we might see where Spain himself decides, you know, hey, Fuhrer, you know, nobody cares about that guy, right? Let's attack Fuhrer. I'm sorry, Fuhrer. But, you know, there's been a lot of sort of back and forth deals going on, I think, in Europe. And it's going to be interesting to see as Jamie consolidates that central sort of underbelly, how things are going to change.
Yeah, I think Jamie has been contested. Let's not say he's grown uncontested, but he's managed a strong foothold in central Italy. He's got quite a bit of war score on the Italians here. It's unlikely Italy is able to recover from this. And then he's also slowly gobbling up two Sicilies, so it's a tremendous amount of dev here in Italy. There's 150 left in two Sicilies, almost 700 in this small section of Italy. So expect Jamie to be a power by halfway through the session.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting.
I did mean, by the way, I meant uncontested specifically by you and the Ottomans. But you're speaking of that dev. That's a lot of dev, yeah. And I'm going to be interested to see if France, I mentioned it before, Fuhrer, if he's going to spend time trying to get any of that Italian land, or if he's going to focus himself entirely on Lotharingia and sort of that sort of thing, as well as with Africa.
Yeah, it will be interesting. Like we mentioned, Italy is almost, not quite, but close to parity from a development perspective with France. It's just a lot of dev packed into a little area. When you take a look at that dev map mode, 20s across the board. Yeah, I could see Fuhrer making a move into maybe Genoa and Piedmont. He is currently collecting down here, I believe. Yep. And that would be a significant boost to his trade power if he was able to grab Genoa. So we'll see.
And on the other side, you have Georgia, who kind of is stuck in his homeland, a rock in the hard place, but he's gotten some land over in Dalmatia that he's able to take Venice at least from there. So it'll be interesting to see if you and he try to make a move there. to get him some more land, because even if all he gets is 2 states, those are very important and powerful states, and could really boost his economy and his dev quite a bit.
Yep, his economy still relatively low compared to most other players at this point. Most players are in the triple digits, so he does need some help there. It will be interesting to see if he's able to capture any of this, or it gets gobbled up by the Swiss and Jamie before George is able to move. And as we shift, we'll call it south here, into Africa, there's some interesting developments. Ethiopia was at war with Britain over, I'm not exactly sure what at one point. They've made the transfer over into Western Africa from their original area. Do you see future conflicts over this land in Africa?
Oh, absolutely, man. All you gotta do is look at Ethiopia's allies right now. Um, and right there on the right of your screen, you got Malay and Ashikaga. Those boys, as we all know, are going
Ashikaga
heavy
now
into the.
Japan.
Oh yeah, sorry, yes, Japan. Congrats, by the way, Faceless, for doing that. But you know, uh, you got a very strange, almost a 5 front war or something that's going to be coming for sure. Um, like I said last time, giving up the Cape was a big mistake, and I think that Ethiopia is getting some naval help to hopefully be able to push that back. And it's going to be interesting to see how much Diplo he does with the European powers saying, hey, we'll keep, Britain occupied down here if you guys want to try to make some moves on his homeland while his fleets are away, something like that. It's going to be very interesting to see how, on the other side, that guy's going to manage, trying to decide, okay, Martian Portugal is allied with Alaska. What's that about? You know, what all is going on here, and how he's going to be able to manage that as Great Britain with all his, um, colonial nations and colonial rivals and stuff, trying to figure things out.
Interesting. Spain actually has no allies right now.
Yes, I thought that was quite interesting. He
Portugal
is.
allied with France and Alaska, as you mentioned. Great Britain allied with Georgia and Sweden. God knows why he's allied with Georgia. That's interesting.
Yeah, and it'll be very interesting. Spain pretty much he's in a position where he has a royal marriage with France, so you can assume he's not going to attack. I kind of brought it up earlier, but it's pretty unlikely he'll attack France. But I think it's very likely he'll go for either you or the Mamluks, or probably both. And it's going to be interesting to see who he allies. If he's going to ally, I don't know that he can ally Russia, but if he's going to ally perhaps Rajputana to attack you, if he's going to ally you, no, he can't ally you. But if he allies Commonwealth to attack you, or he allies Ethiopia and says, hey, Mamluk's day is done. Why don't you help me? I'll take the Alexandria node. You can have Aden and everything south. It's going to be very interesting to see how Jamie plays off his sort of political freedom. And there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be willing to ally with him, because he has the reputation of being a good player, because he is a great player. And he's been able to fight a lot of wars relatively effectively. Sometimes wars that, against odds, he shouldn't have to fight against, but that's just a part of a game like this. So it's going to be, he's in a fun position, I think.
And we'll pivot and wrap up the New World. Quite crowded, quite peaceful. We have, I believe, 4 different Mexican colonial nations. Ashikagan, Mexico, Lotharingian, Mexico, Texas, New Spain. Do you see any conflict here, or are these just players looking to support their overlords, or for potential wars in Europe or Asia?
I think there's going to be some conflict. Obviously, Lotharingia is going to go the way of the dodo. Portugal's alliance with Ashikaga is interesting or not Ashikaga, sorry, Alaska, is interesting because they might come to some sort of deal with Japan, some sort of middleman deal or something. I don't quite know how that would work out. And then it really depends on how Britain and Portugal want to play, because there's a lot of a lot of things that can happen in North America. Mindboy's spreading out into colonial areas that are not his own. I would say almost prematurely. He doesn't quite have as much dev as I would like to see, but he's done a very good job either way. And so it's going to be interesting to see if he's putting himself out where he's going to be vulnerable and get attacked, or if he's going to be able to, if it's 200 IQ move and he's able to get a lot of territory before other people can. And it's gonna be kind of fun to see as more and more players die off in the old world and move into colonial nations, if they kind of sway their um, overlords' opinions one way or the other, whether they should be fighting or not. Especially if a player gets slotted into Texas or any one of those colonial Mexican territories, that's going to be very kind of spicy.
Yeah, we have a New Spain player. New Spain was obviously one of the slower colonies to start, as Jamie did not go exploration or expansion, just simply leveraged the national idea and help from Portugal. But the Mexican colonial region has probably the greatest potential, just because there's a decent amount of dev from all the AI that's here, and then obviously a lot of gold and other valuable trade goods. So it will be interesting to see what kind of session New Spain has this coming week.
Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me too terribly much if Jamie Spain encourages his colonial nation to let Portugal take a lot of that, because Portugal's kind of been that's inflation that he might not want to deal with, and Portugal's kind of been doing a really good job of financing his allies, whether or not they're actually allied, but his sort of regional allies and the enemies of his enemies and that sort of thing. So Jamie might want to let that continue and say, hey, look, New Spain, why don't you just focus up on building tall and taking these southern provinces, but leave the gold in central Mexico to my friend here in Portugal.
And we'll wrap up the question we always ask: if we see blue flames this coming week, whose name do we expect them to be next to?
Yeah, so I think Russia is going to get revenge on someone. I have a strong inkling it's going to be attempted revenge against me and the Asians, but I think he might go for you. You might have gotten yourself off some goodwill with that 15k ducats you dropped. Mamluks gotta be. It's gotta be Mamluks. They're gonna have to get involved somewhere, because all they've been doing the past session and a half is letting you take more and more land from them. I think obviously you're gonna be in Blue Flames. I expect one or both of the Indians, and I honestly I think at this point it's better off asking who's not going to be in a player war, and to that I would answer, I'm not expecting Portugal to get in a player war, or if it is, I don't expect them to to be involved for too long. I don't expect Westphalia to be in a player war this session. I think they're going to do as much as they can to consolidate Lotharingian land. They might get in it with Great Britain, but I think they might have another quiet session before them. I think those two are the only two players that are not going to be in a player war this session.
My money is actually going to be on Alaska.
As in not being in the war?
Yeah, I expect the colonizers to allow Alaska to continue to grow unimpeded. Through his alliances right now, Russia may declare on Qing, which would pull Alaska in. I don't see anyone declaring directly on Japan. I do expect Japan to be involved, though, through their strong alliance with Malaya, and then Portugal being Alaska's other ally. I don't expect Portugal to be directly declared on.
But you do expect Westphalia to be at war.
Yes, I do. I think there's a lot of tension here between Sweden, Prussia, Great Britain, France. I think the absence of a Lotharingia player will tide them over momentarily, but they'll quickly gobble this land up, and then the HRE essentially is going to be left with these four players. Westphalia, Prussia, obviously Commonwealth's not actually in it, but has aligned closely with the bloc, and then Switzerland. So it's going to be these four against the
Oh,
world moving forward.
have you seen who the new emperor is for the
It's
HRA?
Portugal.
Yep. Oh man, it's him and Austria are the only ones, and the religious league hasn't fired yet. So that's gonna be very interesting to see who decides to get involved with the religious league. You know, how many of us Asians are gonna care? I might just to go have some fun, but otherwise, um, it might be pretty bloodless as well. A quick war where Portugal you know just fires it off as soon as possible and auto surrenders to let the HRE guys kind of do their thing.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Well, Zale, thank you for the time. Appreciate it as always.
Yeah, and thank you as well, my man.